Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom Weekly from the Greater Orlando Center for Spiritual Living. Practical spiritual insights to help you live a more joyful, empowered, and grounded life.
Let's grow together. Thank you. And now, Reverend Cindy Shelley.
You know, the problem with not coming up immediately after the song is you don't get to tell the band how much you enjoyed what they just did. And it's particularly apropos. Today is the UN's designated Day of Peace, and there will be something at the end of the service that we jump into that a little deeper. I have a little slideshow for you, and that's what I was actually supposed to do today, so it's really prepared. I have slides, I have music. This I found out about this morning, and I had that kind of, oh God, I'm not prepared. But you know what? I went to my first Science of Mind church in January of 1984. I had been invited by a friend I work with to do that. I had been invited by another friend to go see the great guru that she had found that was just, changing her life. And I went all day Saturday and Sunday afternoon, and I saw the guru, and I got more out of my hour at the service than anything else. And I was in just like that. And I was not looking. I didn't need a philosophy. I didn't need a church. I was happy. But I found something, and then I knew I needed to know more. And I jumped in. And because at that center, here we do the basics. In September, we're following the school calendar. There we did the basics in January because we followed the calendar. So, my very first introduction was these 4 talks. And I realized I left my book down there because the 4 talks that we call the basics, and we've done 2 of them already, come out of the Science Mind textbook. If you're going to go very basic, you need to know that we have this thing called the textbook. And if anybody knows where the one with the blue cover and the gold edges that used to sit up here over many years got off to, please let me know, because this is the 50th anniversary edition, and that was my 75th anniversary edition, and I would like to just lay eyes on it again, please, if you know where it is. So way up here, the very beginning, the introduction, before we even get to part 1, chapter 1, is these topics that we call the basics: the thing itself, the way it works, what it does, and how to use it. So going back and just kind of a quick rehash of our first 2 weeks, the thing itself, I like to compare to the material world. It's easier for me to understand spiritual principles sometimes if I have something I can hang it on that's been more part of my life in that principles, science kind of way. So I'm going to use maybe electricity. Electricity has always existed. It's always existed. Then we observed some of what it does, and we started discovering the way it works. Do the same thing with spiritual laws. We have chemistry. Chemistry is the same way. It's always been here. The principles have always been here. They've always worked, and it just took us to go, oh, look, I wonder why that's happening. I wonder where I mix that together and I get something else. How can this be? What's going on? Why does adding heat change things? So we have those things that we think we understand. Do you know what electricity is? Do you know the thing itself? Do you know chemistry itself? Not how it works, not the principles and the rules. No, not really. I mean, what's electricity? It's energy. It's some electrons that are excited. I don't know. I can't explain that. But it is. It obviously is, because I've been able to observe it and figure out how it works and how to use it. Same with chemistry. The thing itself is that it's kind of elusive for us, isn't it? And yet in it are all the things it takes for this to happen. And so that's kind of an easy way for me to think about how spirit might work. Now, those who know, figure out how these things work, they're way ahead of the game because they do know how to use it. Now, how to use it is next week's topic, and that's pretty important, obviously, so you're definitely going to want to get back here and figure that out. But we're here to learn how to use these in our spiritual realm. We want to know what God does, what God itself does. Now, just a quick moment. It took me a long time to start calling God it. When I grew up, and I learned a lot in my English class, it was this kind of, you don't deserve being a male or a female, you're an it. It was a kind of a leftovers thing, things that didn't have identity. And so it took me a while to realize that it meant getting past all of that. It's more than any of the descriptors we could use here. And so I do, and when you hear me treating, I will often use it, and it is now my biggest possible all-containing term. But it took me a while. So if it rubs you the wrong way, if we say the thing itself or something, just give it some deeper thought on that. Okay, got that out of the way. So back to the electricity and chemistry. They are existent, they always have been, without our conscious awareness, without our focus, without any activity on our part. They are out there without our understanding. None of that is required for them to exist. Same with chemistry. They're the things themselves, and they don't need us to exist. They don't need us to work and do their thing. There are universal principles of electricity, same for chemistry, and again, we can study and apply them, but we don't create those principles. We are not the ones that figured that out, and we cannot circumvent them. I cannot decide in this moment, I think I'll have gravity not work for a bit and float. Also good that I can't be sitting in my chair and forget to think about having gravity work and fall out of it or float. They are working with or without any attention from us. And they are also affecting our lives the way they work, right? So we need to understand that spiritual laws are affecting our lives the same way these other things that we feel are more real sometimes than the spiritual laws that we have. Now, what do they do? That's our topic today. What does God do? Well, what do those things do? What does electricity do? Well, it lights up lamps. It runs powerful machines. It somehow does something on tiny little chips inside there, and we get to know what's going on all over the world. Not sure how that works. Thank God there are people that do that. But it also starts fires. It also runs weaponry. It allows us to share opinions out there to the world, whether they need to know them or not, and whatever our purpose is in that. It does things for anyone, anytime, depending on how they use or misuse those principles. That's the way it works out there where you can observe. It's the way it works in the spiritual world. Chemistry, we can make apple pies or we can make bombs. It doesn't care. It's a principle. It's a principle of the universe, and it works how it works. And you either know how to work it or you don't, but it's still out there and it still affects your life. That misusing is something you want to get over. So again, be sure and come back next week and learn how to use it, because that's the topic. So in the spiritual world then, we have the thing itself. Operates on principles. Can't see them. We observe and we deduce and we test. That's how we figured out what electricity does. That's how we figured out chemistry. It's how we figured out math. I'm going to talk about math some in a minute too. We observe, we deduce, and we begin to test. One of the reasons this book that Ernest Holmes wrote, and that is kind of our foundation of philosophy. There's a lot of other parts out there. It's called The Science of Mind, because he explained that it is just as much a science as any other to understand how spirit works. it operates the same way. You make an observation, you suggest a possible reason it's working that way, you test it, you get some results, you confirm, or you find out you were wrong or you were incomplete in your understanding, and you keep moving on and redefining and reworking. We do this in our spiritual life. We look at what's happening. I'm going to go back to that. So it's no respecter of persons. It works for anyone, anywhere, anytime. Everyone gets results based on how well they understand and use the principles. That's why we study them. They are always working, and they know it, or whether we know it is or not. So I was scribbling these notes in a half hour before I got out here, so let's do it. But let's look at math. So one thing we need to know about spiritual law, it's out there, it exists, we don't have to make it work. It's going to work for everybody. We can't ask for special dispensation. That's one of the reasons our prayer looks different in Centers for Spiritual Living. We're not asking for special dispensation. We're not asking anything to be shifted to make it different for us. We're calling on what's available to everybody. We're just claiming our part in that. Math, I love, because there's another principle to know. Math is an underlying principle. Some people think it's almost as close to the whole subtext of the universe as you can get, because these guys can seem to describe everything with it. Some set of parentheses and numbers and division lines can explain all kinds of phenomenon. What I like about it is it really represents absolute abundance, an endless supply. Think about it. I'd balance my checkbook, I need twos. You want your checkbook at the same time, you got all the twos you need. Everybody on earth could be balancing their checkbook at the same time, and we're not going to run out of twos. And we're not going to run out of this minus this equals this. And half of us are going to get that wrong, and half of us are going to get it right because of how we understand math, right? But it represents another outer world thing we can look at that stands in for this truth about spirit. It's endless. It's got everything in it. Everything. You can't use it up. You can't use up the laws. You can't use up the principles. You can't use up the abundance. You can't use up the love. You can't use up the joy. We can all be happy here. I hope I've got something we're going to do after I talk about peace a little bit, and I hope we're all so joyful and excited and having such good fun that maybe we gen more. I don't know, but we certainly can't use it up. Everybody on earth could be happy and joyful at the same moment, and there's plenty of joy to go around. We can all be healthy, and there's plenty of health to go around. It's out there. It's for us. So these principles and laws operate, and they were created by and of the thing itself. We have this symbol. It's up here. It's over there. If you ever look in the textbook, there's copies of it in here with lots of words in them that represent various aspects, right? So let me just talk about that. So the symbol, it's called the teaching symbol now. It was actually the symbol for our whole movement for a long time. The circle has always kind of been, right, it's infinity. It goes on, no beginning, no end. And it's divided into three parts. And the upper part represents the thing itself. And the middle part represents the stuff of the thing itself. So we're all down, our lives are down on the lower part. So it's that which knows itself and from which all comes, that which is the origin and the creator of all things, working through, this is what the V represents, it works through the stuff of itself to create the manifest world. Our bodies, our experiences, our emotions, all of that. The universe as we know it, when we're looking out there and seeing planets and stars, this is still part of manifestation. So it's doing that in abundance and containing all knowledge. But here's the trick. We can be just subject to it. We can just let life happen to us as it wishes to happen. Or we can call on all of that. We can draw it into our lives in ways that make a difference for us and maybe for others too. When I decide to call into my life being an ordained minister, I'm affecting me, but I'm affecting you too, right? So we're uplifting the world as a whole as we bring out more of our high expression. There is a thing we have to know, and it's right, I marked this. So this is the beginning of the What It Does chapter right here. It's only about 11 pages, and it's one of the longest ones in this little section. And the first page, in capital letters, all caps, we don't see that in here very often, but what we draw from it must draw through the channel of our own minds. So it's all out there. The absolute endless supply, the absolute knowledge of all things, the absolute of all. It's there. It's in potential form. It's in God. If we want to choose what part of that is in our life, as opposed to just seeing what happens from our experiences, it has to happen through the channel of our own minds. Now that jumps over there into the how to use it. But the reason we use it is because of what it does, right? We want to use the principles and the laws and the love that governs them because we want to live as fully and wholly and completely and perfectly as we can. We're going to talk about peace in a little bit. I'm going to keep this part short so we get to fully enjoy that. Well, if we want peace, we have to draw that into our lives because there's a lot out there working against that, isn't there? Not just these big world events either, just in our day-to-day lives. There's all kinds of things that we can have be irritants. There's all kinds of things we can have be distractions. There's all kinds of people that can upset us if we let that happen. Peace is something we have to seek and draw in through our own minds. Health is something we draw in to experience the understanding that we are whole and healthy and designed in such a way that we can, sometimes with support and help from outside, find our way into our wholest expression. Now, there are teachings that tell you it must only happen through your mind. Science, we're real wide open on that, right? I told somebody early in my time, I walked in and they said, so I said, I need to take this aspirin. And they were going to get on me, right? You know, you need an aspirin to get over your headache? And I said, no, I need an aspirin for my lowered consciousness so that my headache will heal. Right? You gotta learn the tricks. But you need to go to the doctor? Go. Where do you think the medical wisdom of God comes through? Which hands do you think are providing that? All those wonderful, crazy machines they've got out there. I used to work at an imaging center, and we had CAT scans and MRIs. MRIs, when they first came out, they're magnetic imaging, and they're pretty easy to do now. But the first ones that came out, I worked with a doctor that had the first freestanding one, not in a hospital, in Houston. They were so powerful that they had to be in a separate building that was a certain distance from any cars or any, so we had to rent this vast room in a big brick building to put this machine because they weren't sure what all it was going to drag in there with that magnet. and if you were ever there when somebody accidentally walked in the room with a wristwatch, it was over against the machine, right? So, but hey, that was somebody who figured out a little bit more about magnetism. There's some laws around that too, and we've continued to refine that and work on that. But all of these are just tools and availability. God works through our hands. sees through our eyes. God is watching us. Where from? There, right? Through our words, through our actions, through our activities. This is how, okay. I'm off on a tangent. But the important thing is we are the nodes, the connections to the God mind. We are the place where it comes into form and use. We are what it happens through. And we have some, accept it or not, we have some responsibility as that. Be responsible to ourselves first, responsible to our families, responsible to our communities. When we are living the highest and best and setting the highest and best example we can and finding our peace and finding our harmony and finding our joy and letting it fill us, getting into harmony with ourselves, things happen. People are drawn, right? When you see somebody, and I wish Cheryl was here. She just went on the Alaska cruise. And there were musicians from New Thought there, and one of the ones she got to meet was Michael Gott. I went to school with Michael. He started off as the musician at the Dallas Center for Spiritual Living, found at a country club bar. Knew nothing about this teaching, brought in, he started writing beautiful music. He wound up, I was in ministerial school at the same time he was. He is now the senior minister at the Unity Pyramid. If any of you have ever been to Houston and know about it, it's one of the largest Unity churches in the country. But I remember seeing him one time, and he literally was becoming clear. It was like he was sitting at a piano at a Silmar, but it was like there was radiant light streaming right out of him. Now, he was in his element. A Silmar is where, for many, many years, with Ernest Holmes in place, we had an annual convention. He spoke there. I've stood on the stage where he delivered some of his talks. It is a kind of a magical place. We might all be a little more radiant when we're there. But it was like almost streaming out of him. And that is where somebody can get when their life is dedicated fully and in harmony with this teaching. That they are, when you talk about clear vessels, I've seen it. I've seen people be that. That's something we could work toward. It would be beautiful, eh? So what does God do? God perfects. If we are not experiencing perfect, we just haven't let enough of God shine through, because that's what we are. We were sparked from the perfect, and therefore we can only be that. What does God do? God brings about whatever is necessary to get to the goal. The goal came from a desire within you, and where did that come from? God put the desire. God put the idea. And when you acknowledge that and you ask for it to come into manifest form, I often use the term your felt experience. I want this in my felt experience, because sometimes things come into people's lives and they don't even recognize them. Yeah, I'm not even going to tell it, but that beautiful one about the guy that's praying for rescue and turns down, God saved me from the flood, and he turns down all the different rescue vehicles that come there. And God's like, I sent the police car, I sent the fire truck. Sometimes we don't recognize. So in my felt experience, I'm ready for that. I'm open to that. Let it happen through me. There it comes. In ways unexpected, because we don't know how to do half the stuff we actually wind up getting accomplished in our lives. I heard a good chuckle for that, right? But if we let Spirit do its thing as us, not even through, guys, as us, it all comes together in some wonderful way. Synchronicity is God's signature. Don't overlook it. I need to da-da-da-da-da, and you open up the newspaper and you go, oh, wow, that God's talking in all kinds of ways. You got to pay attention. What does God do? God does anything. God does everything. Our trick is just to put ourselves in the way of all that everything and take the part we want. knowing that, like math, it's all still out there for everybody else. Just get what you want. And it doesn't have to be big and huge. We get all messed up. I had somebody tell me one time, your parents raised you to be a princess and nobody's given you a castle yet. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we think we have to achieve certain things. And oh my goodness, I feel so sorry for everybody that thinks they have to be the most beautiful person on TikTok. Find the most perfect secrets for under eye bags. I've got one, wear glasses. I'm about to perhaps have cataract surgery and they're going to make my vision not need them anymore. And I'm like, wait, I'm not sure I might need those. So why do I get off on these tangents? That's why you need notes, is for your riff goes off somewhere. What does God do? What do you want God to do? Maybe the first thing we all need to do is decide what we want God to do. Besides, hold us to the ground with the law of gravity and give me switches for the law of electricity and let me bake up some good cakes now and then with the laws of chemistry. Maybe God wants to do more than that, and I just need to know what it is. And then say, let that be. Allow. When I write these out, because I'm prepared, I always have a real zinger to end with. I only got to math, and the rest is... So I don't have a zinger to end with, except you don't have to understand the thing itself, just know it's there. You don't need to know exactly the way it works, just understand its principles and laws. They're working all the time for everybody. And then get busy letting the abundant perfection and wholeness of the world brought to us by the thing itself operate in you as you. And so it is. So I speak in the first person, for the only person I know about is me. And what I know is known by all of us, for each and every one of us does reside in this wonderful thing we call God, the thing itself, that which contains within itself the idea behind everything and the actual stuff from which everything is made, that which contains within itself love, joy, peace, harmony, health, the absolute perfect concept of each and everything expressing in its perfection. And so I know that I am of that. I was sparked into creation as a body that, with a body, I am greater than that. I am with a body that is perfect in its design, including knowing exactly how to heal itself. And this is true of us as individuals and us as organizations, us as a world. We are born into manifestation with the ability to heal ourselves. And so I know for myself, I know for each one here, I know for Reverend Martin, that this ability to find within self what is necessary to heal, to draw to self the perfect partnerships for healing, to allow the knowledge of esoteric ideas, the knowledge of Western medicine, the knowledge of God that is designed to help set us into the place where our healing occurs, because it is really us that heals. That all of that is in its perfect place, happening in its perfect time, that each and everything is drawn as needed, all guidance is received exactly as needed, and everything is set in place so that I, we, he, you, the world, is set up to heal into the wholeness that was created in it, set up and ready to heal into its highest expression, to act from deep inner knowledge in all that happens and all that transpires, in the way we behave in the world, the way we treat one another. This is healing, and this is in God's design. And so I call it forth with these words. I call it into our lives. I call it into all lives. This ability to come back into the manifest form of perfection that we were designed to hold. To act from that, to act with that assurance that God is in it all, through it all, as it all. And we have only to recognize it and allow it. Letting that go into God with my gratitude that we live in such a wonderful universe, that we are created by that which knows all and does all, and that we have simply to let it be. I do let it go and let it be. And so it is.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Spiritual Wisdom Weekly. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, follow us on social media at Greater Orlando Center for Spiritual Living, and support our work, including this podcast, at gocsl.org. Until next time, take good care and keep growing in spirit.